Welcome to Keeping Up at the Capitol with Senator Tom Casperson. This show comes to you from Lansing each month to keep you informed on events happening here that are important to the people of the Upper Peninsula. This week, Senator Casperson discusses the coming legislative session with Chair of the House Natural Resources Committee from Macomb County, Representative Andrea LaFontaine, and Chair of the House Tourism Committee from Presqu'île County, Representative Peter Pettalia. And now, let's join Senator Casperson and his guests.
Welcome, Representative LaFontaine and Representative Pettalia. To get us started, I think what I'll have you do is have you start telling our viewers a little bit about yourselves, and maybe if, Andrea, if you could start, just tell people about your background, where you came from, a little bit about your district.
Sure, absolutely. I'm Andrea LaFontaine. I'm from District 32, which is northern Macomb County and parts of St. Clair County. I grew up in New Baltimore. I later moved to Richmond. I've lived there my entire life. Went to Central Michigan University. After that, my degree was in political science. My master's is in public administration. That led me into politics. I had interned for Senator Sanborn, who was then term limited. At the end of his term, I had to decide what I wanted to do, if I wanted to seek a job in Michigan or out of state. I then realized that my odds were better out of state, and that was a red flag to me. So from there, I decided I could be part of the problem, the mass exodus leaving the state at that time, or I could stay here and try to fix it. Then I ran for office and wound up here.
Now, just so the viewers know, you got your degree in college, not high school, right? You graduated from high school.
Yes, I did.
Peter?
That's a great thing. Well, Tom, thanks for having me on your show. It's always good to be down here with another Northern Michigan rep, and we'd love to have Andrea here. It's a great balance that shows that the House and the Senate are doing great things together. But my background is I served as a township supervisor for 16 years. My district is the 106, which runs from Sheboygan through the Tawases, so I have 5 counties that I represent right now. Served as a township supervisor for 16 years, involved with local government for over 30 years. But my background, what brought me to chair tourism, was all the things that I've been doing up there in that area all of these years. Sitting on state park advisory boards, waterway advisory boards, just trying to enhance our tourism industry in northern Michigan. So I'm excited to be here, Tom. Looking forward to the show.
Maybe we could, and you did a little bit, Peter, but maybe we could talk a little bit about, in detail about the districts. And Andrea, I think each one of us come from a district that has something unique about it, and so maybe we could let our viewers know what that is, as Peter talked a little bit about the tourism side of it, but maybe just share something about your district. Sure.
My district is unique in the fact that I have 7 townships in St. Clair County, and then I have 2 municipalities in Macomb County. And 3 of them combined all border Lake St. Clair, which is a huge attraction in our area. We have tons of boating, recreation, really big on fishing, sturgeon fishing and muskie fishing in Lake St. Clair. So it's a very unique district, and I enjoy representing it.
Yeah. Again, most of us represent a pretty unique district, and I'm pretty proud of the diversity in my district. Again, I go from Sheboygan all the way through Iosco. Every one of my counties borders on Lake Huron shorelines, but we have a multitude of inland waterways, and our tourism industry is just great in the area. There's so many things to offer, but the diversity goes from the Lake Huron shoreline through the farm and agricultural industry, and then we have a lot of local industries as aggregate industries, cement industries, local machine shop industries, automotive industries in there. We have Coletta Air in Iosco County, which is a great big industry as far as bringing in high-tech jobs to the area. So the counties that I represent are hugely diversified, and it just flows so nice that it all flows into our natural resources and our tourism industry.
That leads us into one of the reasons we're coming together, the 3 of us, is the committees we serve on. And Andrea, maybe you could explain a little bit about what your thoughts are moving forward right now. You chair Natural Resources.
Yep.
Natural Resources is unique to the whole state, but really unique to some parts of the state in the sense of the natural resources for industry and for tourism. So maybe you could just share some thoughts on what you see with the committee that you're chairing and where you'd like to see it go.
Sure. I'm really excited, and I was honored to be asked to serve as chair of the committee. One of the issues that we have been talking about, and I know the governor did mention this in his State of the State address as well, was the low lake levels, and possibly looking at Representative Janetsky's bill that would open up the DNR Trust Fund to dredging harbors and whatnot. And that's something that I think would be extremely beneficial, not just to one district here or there, but to the state as a whole. So that's one of the issues I'm looking forward to tackling. Some of the other issues we looked at was forest land management, which I know you had a huge part in, and I'm looking forward to continuing to work on that as well, along with trails and really just bettering our state and really utilizing all the natural resources we have, but making sure they're protected at the same time.
Right. Absolutely. Peter?
You know, it's an interesting thing. The committees that we're both chairing was one committee last year. And when you look at natural resources, tourism, and outdoor recreation, in Michigan, that's a big scope of issues. So it was decided by leadership to split it, and I'm very honored to serve with Andrea on this, her chairing the natural resource part, me chairing the tourism part. And I really believe that we're going to have a lot of cross issues here because so many things are of the same. But there is distinctive natural resource issues and there's distinctive tourism issues. And again, back to my area, we have a multitude of harbors. Tourism, boating industry is huge, but you know, you and I are from the northern areas, and our thoughts on tourism oftentimes is different than what really the whole state is as a whole. You know, we like to hunt and fish and snowmobile and motorcycle and boat and the rest of it that we see, which is northern Michigan. But we also have in Michigan, you know, we have the casinos, we have a convention and visitors bureau, we have so many things that bring in other things into Michigan. Our racetracks that are underutilized and the things that we have in southern Michigan that I believe we need to marry with what we have driving from the northern Michigan. And tourism is a huge industry in Michigan. Ever since the Pure Michigan campaigns, Michigan is on the map. There is nothing better than to be in another state and hear Tim Allen's voice. It wants you to come to Michigan and to see all that we have to offer. So I'm excited to get going with Andrea on the things that we're looking forward to doing.
Yeah, I agree. And you've got the tourism side of it. The Senate did the same thing. We split them out for this very same reason. You're dealing with so much. We need to separate it out. So I think that was a good thing that the House did too. That'll help hopefully expedite each area. Andrea, you mentioned the harbors, and one of the issues we're dealing with that is really statewide. If you look at the map and look at Michigan, the coastal side of the UP, we have harbors all over the place. Lower Michigan, the same thing on both sides. You mentioned, Pete, where you come from, and the various different areas. It is becoming a problem with the low lake levels, right. And even without the low lake levels, through the years, there's always been the need for the maintenance of dredging our harbors out, and it affects more than even, I would say, the tourism side of it, but the industrial side of it.
Absolutely.
We moved the iron ore out of the Upper Peninsula, which comes down to Detroit and turns into cars that we drive every day. But do you see us as a committee moving forward on those type of things, and maybe share a little bit more about that? I know we're talking about it. I know you mentioned it, so I know you must be talking about it. Do you see that thing as a statewide issue for us?
I definitely would think so. I mean, we suffer from low lake levels in Lake St. Clair as well, and something that I think is interesting in regards to Southeast Michigan in my area in particular is we often have to deal with our international partners across the river and across the lake, and we have to hear their feedback in regards to things that are going on as well. So we try to make that a partnership there, but I know if we're suffering from it, then they're suffering from it as well. So there are things that need to be addressed to accomplish what we're looking for the entire state, not just necessarily the northern, the southern, the western, the entire state of Michigan as a whole.
I have to agree with her. You know, our harbors and waterways are a huge transportation infrastructure that we have in Michigan. It was nice to see the governor address that. When he talked about road funding, he said, I'm talking roads, but it includes harbors and the needs to make sure that these are maintained. You mentioned the steel industry. Well, I have calcite and also Lafarge Stoneport, which makes limestone, which is the flux for making steel. And right now with Lafarge and Alpena as a cement industry, they're telling me that they're predicting 60 to 70% loads this year, which ultimately ups the cost of transportation, ultimately ups the cost of the material once it reaches its final destination, which ultimately has to be spread to the customers, us, the consumers. So we have to be concerned about that, and there has been some great conversation on that already. There's a couple of bills, encouraging the federal government to step forth with the monies that have always been dedicated to the harbors, not necessarily the private harbors, because we have two different issues here, but the industrial harbors, the ones that are hauling the industrial materials. We have to definitely get in there and protect that area. And it's interesting to me that the federal government has found it in their infinite wisdom to pull back those fundings when Michigan right now is suffering, when we need to enhance these industries that are really just making a comeback right now. And Andrea made a great point. We have to work with our international partners because it is an issue. These lakes do connect to international waterways. And it isn't specific just to the UP or my area. We're going all the way down to Chicago and all the way down to Detroit and all the waterways in between. So I'm looking forward to working with the governor and seeing what we can do for funding of these.
Stay on that issue just for a second, because Pete, you're dead on about the federal side of this thing. We've been struggling with that. I think the last report I read, they had well over $1 billion that was put into, through the fees that they charge, was put into the idea of dredging and for that purpose. But I believe they've only allocated between 700 and 800 million of that amount.
That's right.
So far less than what they actually had available to for dredging. So I don't think it's wise for us to depend on the federal government. So would you agree that we should be moving forward as a state, almost in spite of the federal government? We want their help and we need their help, but I don't think it'd be wise for us to sit around waiting, because it doesn't look good.
If I could take this, Andrea, I agree 100%. We take our federal money and we give it to this other bureaucratic organization called the Department or Army Corps of Engineers, who is this big cumbersome outfit. And I don't want to take a lot away from them, but they spend a lot of times with the studies and the rest of them where you and I just want to get in there and get it done. So yes, I think the state could take the lead on this, but I still think it's the responsibility of the federal government to help supply the dollars to do that, because it is our money.
Right, I would agree. Andrea, any thoughts on that? Because I think that I see us heading in that direction. There's been so much talk about it, and the momentum is building because it affects everybody all the way around the state, which means it affects a lot of Senate districts, it affects a lot of House districts, and our people are asking us for some relief. Do you see the state stepping up almost in spite of the federal government not?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think we definitely need to. And I do think Rep. Janetsky's bill is right on with possibly looking at the DNR trust fund money, because with it at its cap of $500 million that's in there, I mean, it's something to consider.
One of the things I'll talk about the trust fund for a second. My past history with it is that it's very unique and very sensitive, because the people that initially put this thing together are very sensitive that it doesn't the fund get raided. And I agree with that mindset myself. Is it fair to say we should probably focus on, if we did look at the trust fund, to focus on the trust fund only being used in the sense of natural resources? In other words, not to go get it for funding highways, something totally unrelated to the natural resource side of things. Is that
right?
fair?
There should be specific intentions, most definitely, because the last thing we would want is that fund being abused in any way, shape, or form. But if that money is there and it's available, and right now it's overflowing into the Park Endowment Fund, I mean, it would make sense to look at that as an option. So I think it's something that doesn't need to be pushed off the table just yet, but should be considered under the right measures.
Sure.
I agree also. I'm a strong supporter of the trust fund.
Yeah.
I was there at the time we voted on the trust fund. I like the fact that we took monies that were generated on our properties, and I mean all the citizens of Michigan. This is public trusted land to Michigan. The dollars that are generated on that put in these funds, and they are enhancing everything that we have in Michigan. In my time as a township supervisor, I wrote and with my group and successfully received $1.3 million to purchase a lighthouse and grounds, ultimately for the people of the state of Michigan through the trust fund. So I agree the trust fund needs to be protected, but I also think that we could look at it and open the horizons of it, sticking to what you had just said. What does it do to enhance our outdoor experience? What does it do to enhance our lives in Michigan as a whole? And when we start talking about harbors, I think that's a reasonable thing to think about. When we talked earlier about the money coming from the federal government, that's monies, in my opinion, for industrial dredging. Now, when we talk about the waterways, harbors, a lot of times we had a city or municipality that took waterways monies 20, 30 years ago to enhance their city municipal harbors. Now waterways controls that, and back then when things were good and there was a lot of boaters, waterways monies were gathered by gas tax, marine gas tax, and dockage fees. Well, because of the economy, those funds have diminished because boating has diminished. The economy's bad, fuel's expensive, people aren't boating as much. So there really isn't enough money coming into the Waterways Trust Fund as there was before to do the things that we need to have done. So I think that's a reasonable thing to consider.
Sure. I think our viewers listening to this dialogue understand maybe a little bit better that how big our ports are and the idea of the dredging and everything that goes into this, how critical that is. But I think let's move on to the committees themselves. And I know it's early on, so I don't know if there's a whole lot that's been introduced in either one of the committees, but maybe if you do have a few things that have been introduced so far and you could just share that with us, what's starting to come out, what people are looking at.
Do you want to go ahead?
I'd be happy to go first. I
Sure.
really have only one bill that's there, and it's more of a housekeeping bill at this time. Leadership is still digesting the bills that are coming in, and we're only 2 days into this at this point,
Right.
and we're very early on. But I know Andrea is setting her committee up and her goals. We're setting our committee up and our goals. We're planning some things along the way. We're going to be doing a lot of travels around Michigan to see what we need to do. And again, going from visiting the casinos down in Detroit and the convention centers and on the western shorelines to Traverse City, Petoskey, Alpena, Mackinac, all the way through the UP, and see what we can do to bring it all together. We talked a little bit about taking on the Pure Michigan funding. So we want to make sure we continue that. There's a couple of snowmobile trips planned, motorcycle trips we're trying to do to get things done. But there isn't any real hard bills in my committee at this time. I don't want to speak for Andrea.
And I think that's one thing that's going to be sort of a unique challenge is with these committees now being split is deciding where they go. And I think something key to remember with that is Representative Pettalia and I have a great working relationship, and I hope that we'll continue that through the committee process. But some of the bills that I have seen being referred to the Natural Resources Committee have been in regards to invasive species, which we still know is a problem, and possibly looking at the plant species that have become invasive, especially in inland lakes. We're hearing a lot about that and the damage and destruction they're causing, and really not promoting the same recreation that had been there before. So looking into that, and then a few of the gun bills I've seen have trickled their way into my committee, so I'm sure that's an issue that will come up within this next term. It's just a matter of when we go about that.
Well, just a quick heads up, our committee has kicked out we're going to be kicking out the quality forest management plans that are out there. I think it's a 9-bill package. I think you remember we dealt with that a little bit last year, but it's coming again. So we're looking forward to working with you on that, and we do think the timber industry plays a huge role in our economy and our base, especially in northern Michigan, but really throughout the entire state. So that'll be coming out of our committee on its way over to you shortly. Certainly room for improvement. I'm sure that we need you to weigh in on that. Peter, you talked a little bit about some of the industries and stuff in your district. Maybe you could zoom in on one of them. As to what are the opportunities? We talk a lot about natural resources and how important it is to our economy and everything, but what are some of the major players and the major issues in the districts that you can see?
It's arguably in the 106th district, depending on where the economy is at the time, what is the number one industry? It's, and I could tell you that the three in the contention all the time is tourism, our industrial base, and agriculture. And it's always a fight to see which is the number one producer, because ag, during the hard economic downturns that we had in 07, 08, and 09, agriculture was the number one industry in our district. And then as our tourism picked up, then tourism picked up and became the number one industry. And now that our industrial base is coming back, it's coming back to them. But those three industries are always chasing to see who's number one. So when I say it like that, I want our citizens know that it is collectively all three very important to keep moving forward on. And the tourism industry is a nice industry, and it's broad in its scope. And Andrea and I had a meeting earlier today on our TB issue that we have in the 452 DM zone. And that's a very big issue in my area, and I worked with it when I was on the Natural Resource Committee last year. And as I was speaking with Chair LaFontaine on natural resources, we're going to be putting a package of bills together that is going to be protecting our ag industry, our dairy and beef industry, also protecting our sportsmen. We're working with the USDA. And really, this is a combined issue that I can see will be marrying both of our committees together on issues like that. So there's many, many issues. And, I've been involved with hunting and fishing all of my life. And I have a lot of sportsmen's groups that I've had a lot of district-wide meetings on. And there's a wide variety of issues that they want to talk about. One is antler restrictions. They're looking like it seems to be going towards a 3-point or better rule. They like the thought of having a better quality animal. So with that, are we talking about still allowing them to harvest an animal? Because a lot of people like to eat venison. So maybe you purchase a buck license, 3 points or better, take a doe if you don't have an opportunity to take a buck. So this may be a good thing for us to do. And there's lots of other issues. One that keeps coming up in my area is the youth hunt. People believe in the youth hunt, and I passed the hunter mentoring bill last year, which is a good thing, but maybe it should be does only. We want to encourage people to take animals and a young person to get into the hunting and the great outdoors, trapping, hunting, and fishing. That's what we want them to get away from the computer. We want them to start remembering what your grandfather and your grandmother did and make sure we don't lose that tradition. But we also don't want to take the breeder bucks out of the breeding pool prior to the rut. And that seems like what we have been doing. So Andrea is going to be doing a lot of that, but that, again, that brings in tourism industry too. So there's quite a few things going on, Tom.
Yeah, there is. Andrea, your district may be a little bit different, I don't know.
Actually, talking about it, they're pretty common. They have a lot in common between the manufacturing and the industrial portion. I mean, being from southeastern Michigan, people working for the big three and auto dealers and whatnot, that is something that we see. We also have a lot of agriculture industry in regards to nurseries, orchards. We have a lot of that going on. And we do have tourism, Lake St. Clair, and our Macomb County executive is actually making a pretty big push to clean up our waterways and really utilize the different waterways, the lakes, everything that we have there, and maximize all the potential that they have, which is pretty neat when I represent two counties that do border on the lake, because they're starting to work together and really find something that will benefit the people in both of those counties. So it's something I look forward to. And some of the hunting stuff that Peter had mentioned, I come from a family of big hunters, so I can relate to a lot of those issues as well.
Her district is really unique. I would bet per square mile she has more registered boats in her area than any other county in the state.
Really?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, and I challenge you to look for it on the map because you should be able to locate it in a couple seconds. It's a cross right in the middle of St. Clair County. It sticks out like a sore thumb. So.
Well, that's
sticks out like a unique cross.
Like a unique cross, not a sore thumb.
Sore thumb. Well, Peter, I know that in your case you mentioned hunting, but I also remember you passed something that was pretty instrumental when you were in the House concerning baiting. There were some regions in your area that the sportsmen were really screaming for some relief. Right. And I was really happy to see you get that done. So those have been some of the issues we've been
Well, we're
dealing
not done with that yet. And that's what what we're going to be putting a bill package together, because 4.5 counties still have limited to no baiting.
Yep.
And the DNR and the USDA tells us that they want to bring the herd down. And my citizens are saying, I'd love to. I can't see them. So we want to bring some baiting back. And I have said over and over again that my district wants to be treated the same as every other district. That's all. If you ban baiting, ban baiting. If you have baiting, everybody should be having the same privileges.
One of the things that we're all going to deal with, because we have, I think, almost from the beginning of time, but a lot of concern when you talk about natural resources has always stemmed towards environmental issues versus use issues. And somehow the committees we all chair here, we have to find a way to balance those two interests and those concerns. Any thoughts on what you see from where you come from, Andrea, as far as using the natural resources, but use them wisely, whether it be industrial or recreational, but using them wisely so we're not hurting the environment or and leaving a bad legacy. We want to do both. I would assume you would agree with that?
I would definitely agree with that. And my district is interesting in regards to that because we do have a lot of problems with people polluting our natural resources, which we're trying to work on, but there's a fine line that you walk between over-regulating and just people using common sense and protecting stuff and knowing what's best for their environment. So.
Right. Being, I believe I'm older than both of you. It might not show exactly with you and I, Tom, but I've been around a little bit longer. I've lived through the era when we were blatantly wrong. Yeah. Not that we were wrong for the times. The industries were fulfilling the rules that were in place at the time. But we've made so many great strides over the years. The scrubbers that we're putting on our coal-fired power plants, the scrubbers that we're putting on our cement kilns, the dust and the mercuries that we're controlling now. So we're doing great things, and we need to continue to do great things. And I believe I'm with the rest of us that would say that we also need to promote industry in the state to make sure we bring the jobs back, because jobs help a tax base, which gives us the opportunity to protect the natural resources even that much better. So I'm looking forward to making sure we move Michigan forward when it comes to jobs and growth of our economy, so we can continue on to protect our shorelines and our Great Lakes and our open lands.
Yeah, a lot of people, when we talk about these issues, we commonly think that it's just related to the industrial side of using our natural resources, but we run into these conflicts sometimes with the recreational side of the natural resources. There too, it seems like we have to, part of our job is going to be to find a way to strike those balances. And by that I mean, the governor mentioned trail destination state for the state of Michigan. He did not mean one user group. He meant overall to use our resources for those purposes. But when you start talking about building trails, that can get us into some problems too. But would that apply, do you think, in your district too, Andrea, that we still need to use resource but be wise in how we do it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, the trail systems, it's really an interesting look into what we have, because oftentimes that we have public lands and people think there's the destination for this public land and we want to get there, but we also have to cross private lands to get there. So we have to have a partnership between government and private landowners, and that's a big question on what to do, liabilities and the rest of them. But one other thing that I'm running into in my area when it comes to natural resources is water. We have a lot of farms, a lot of ag, and with the low water table right now, other people are starting to be concerned when they see the agricultural industry irrigating as much as they do, and especially since July and August were the hottest months in our records, and we had a drought further south than us was worse than where we were, but there was a lot of questions on, are we using our agricultural waters properly, which is natural resources. So that's going to be an interesting issue, and I know Andrea had a meeting yet just today on possible changes and needs that we need to do to protect our natural resources, and then also protect the ag industry.
Well, I see we're out of time. I want to thank both of you for coming in. Representative LaFontaine, Representative Pettalia, thanks for coming in, and I want to thank our viewers for sitting in and seeing what's going on around the state, and maybe a little bit of in-depth into our natural resources. So thank you for coming.
Senator Casperson, it's been fun.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.